Greetings, my fellow bookworms. It's Fanya here, and I'm doing another reading wrap-up. It is finally July. I don't know about you guys, but where I am, the winter was so long and the spring was so short-lived. It was kind of insane. And despite the fact that there was a lot of indoor time going on because of that, I didn't actually get around to reading that many books in April, May, and June. Now, this is for a few different reasons. One, I do have a day job that I work at full-time, so obviously that takes up a lot of my time. And two, I am working on my own books behind the scenes, so that also obviously takes up a lot of my time, which means I don't have as much free time for reading as I once did. But I still managed to get through a few books in the past 3 months, so I'm going to talk about them. First up is How to Become the Dark Lord and Die Trying by Django Wexer. So I really wanted to love this book. The concept and the summary of it sound perfect for me as someone who likes anime and manga, because this clearly was heavily inspired by those genres. But I didn't love the book as much as I thought I was going to. There's a couple reasons for that, to be honest. First one, this one's story related. So I was going through the vast majority of this book just thinking, this is gonna turn into ReZero, isn't it? This is gonna turn into ReZero, right? You're clearly making this just ReZero. Can you just get to that point and establish it already? And it did establish in the end that, yeah, this is basically just a variation of ReZero, the anime. It just took a really long time for it to get there and drew it out, which to people who don't know what ReZero is, that's probably fine. It probably hit you as emotionally hard as it was supposed to. But anyone who picks this up is probably going to be aware of what ReZero is and the basic premise of it. And when that happens, yeah, just establish it right off the bat, because otherwise you're just kind of dragging this out and we're all waiting for it. The second thing about this book that bugged me was the humor. I'm not gonna lie, the humor. So, basic premise is Davi, the main character and narrator, came from our world at some point in the past, and now she's in this fantasy world where she's the chosen one. She's supposed to save it, she's supposed to do this and that. But every single time she dies, she basically restarts. That's what happens. Her life restarts. And, you know, that's fine. So a lot of the humor comes from her making jokes that are references to things in our world, which works to a certain degree. Some of the jokes hit. Some of them don't. After a while, it starts getting really stale. Personally, what I think would have been better is if they changed up those jokes just a little bit, and instead of just having people... So essentially what happens with the jokes is that she says something that's a reference that's kind of funny. All the other characters just look at her weird, especially when it's a new character, and then they just move on. And as the book goes on, just all the characters just go, yeah, Davi just says weird stuff, ignore it. Which is boring! That just gets boring after a while. What I think would have been funnier is if instead, sometimes when Davi said something, the people in this fantasy world actually knew what the words were, or what they were referencing, or at least thought they did. I think it would have been funnier if Davi had said something that was a reference as a joke, but to them it means something that's actually, you know, real or relevant, and they go off and they have a misunderstanding. I think that would have been funnier. An example is there's a scene where she jokingly, well, semi-jokingly, names one of the characters her Captain of Shenanigans, and he's just like, what the heck is a shenanigan? It would have been funnier if he had a different definition in his world and his language of what shenanigan means, and had gone off and caused chaos, and then Davi comes up and is like, what the hell are you doing? He's like, well, you said I was the captain of shenanigans. This is a shenanigan. She's like, that is not what I meant. That would have been funnier. I think things like that would have been funnier in the book. So there was that. And also at times the book was a little raunchy. Like, I'm not saying I'm a prude. I admit I don't really enjoy many adult stuff in books, but I'm not a prude or anything. The thing is, some of it was just unnecessary. It just wasn't needed in my opinion, because there's footnotes in this book, by the way. This book has footnotes. Do you know how rare it is to find a book with footnotes? is insane. This book has footnotes. Another reason I really, really wanted to enjoy this. Footnotes. So it has footnotes where Dabby would add additional commentary. And these were usually, you know, more of the secret inner thought kind, which is fine. Except sometimes she would add in just a little too much of detail that we didn't really need to know about her personal life and intimate life. We didn't need that. We didn't need those extra bits of flavor. They didn't add anything. They just crossed the line into gross and TMI. Overall, it was good. Story was interesting. Actual execution, need to cut out some of the extraneous details just a tad, and I need to change up the humor to make this like really, truly stand out. It was still good. I know there's a sequel that's supposed to come out. I'm debating about if I will get it and read it. I might borrow it from the library. I'm not sure I want to spend money on a sequel, to be honest. But overall, it was interesting. And again, if you are a fan of anime and manga, you will probably like this. The humor might be more to your liking in that instance. I don't know. It's up to you. But that was this book. The next book I read was actually ebook from the library. So I cannot physically show you that because it's an ebook. It was Heavenly Tyrant by Zirin J. Zhao. I had read Iron Widow last winter in December. So this for me was great because I know a lot of people were waiting a long time for the sequel and I did not have that long a wait. I enjoyed it. It was fun. It's one of those things of just girl is angry, girl is doing things because she's angry. That's, you know, kind of what happens in a nutshell for most of the books. But it's interesting. I did like it. I did like the expansion of the world. Gotta say, I was not quite expecting who the gods were gonna be and how they were gonna turn out. Definitely was interesting. Definitely looking forward to seeing what the third book ends up holding, though I don't know how long it will be, but writing a good book takes time and people also need money, so I don't fault her for taking time to write sequels or anything like that. And yeah, it was really good. I enjoyed it. I'm not gonna go too much into it because I know it's super popular and you've probably all seen a dozen different reviews on this book or heard a dozen different things about it. I don't need to go into it, but it was really enjoyable. I really liked how the main character really did feel out of her depth. She was very much like, I am angry, I want to do things, I have no idea how to do this, but she, you know, kind of muddled her way through it. That felt very real and relatable to me. I really liked that, and I thought it was really good overall. The character, the dynamics, and the story worked out quite well, so I enjoyed it. The next book I read was The Djinn Bot of Shantiport by Samit Basu. I have been super excited to read this one because this is basically like sci-fi Aladdin variation. Now, it very obviously, as is revealed, especially in the author's note, turned into being less of like, this is an Aladdin retelling and more just, this is inspired by Aladdin and related stories, and it's set in a sci-fi setting. Still really cool, not gonna lie. I went through the majority of this book until the actual Djinnbot appeared, believing that Moku was gonna be the Djinnbot. I am still wondering where Moku came from and what his actual real purpose was. That didn't get answered. Very sad. I would have liked answers. But aside from that, this was a really good story. It wrapped up really well, I think. You know, just because I didn't get those answers doesn't mean it didn't end well. The overall plot is essentially you have this bot that was uncovered. His job is, in his mind, you know, bind circuitry, whatever. That's actually a bit of a whole debate in this book of, you know, bothood or personhood and what it really is and what it means. So there is that in here, which is really interesting. But basically this bot, his purpose is supposed to be to like record lives in order to form a coherent story out of them. And instead he falls in with like two revolutionaries slash reactionaries and grows very attached to them, very emotionally attached for a machine that was sitting in mud for several hundred years and then just got dragged out by a monkey bot. The monkey bot is a character. It's very interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting. It brings up a lot of different ideas in it about a revolution, how to go about it. and, personhood, bothood, and all that kind of stuff. So it was very interesting. It's not a quick read, I can tell you that. Like, it's not super dense or anything, but because of what they discuss so much, it does get a little heavy and bogged down in places. So it's not an easy or light read, but it is a really good read. And again, this is by an author of color about characters of color set in this wonderful science fiction world that feels so rich and amazing. So it really is such a good book. I truly do recommend it. Like, I love reading this, even if it did take me a while to get through it, but I love reading it. Next up was Percy Jackson. Okay, if anybody knows anything about me, know that I was the Percy Jackson kid. I was not a Harry Potter kid. I was a Percy Jackson kid. Percy Jackson all the way. Thank you. So obviously, because more books are coming out, I have to get them and I have to read them. And I'm gonna say, the only thing I wish that was different about this book was that I read it in October. That's it. And that is because, well, one, growing up, I always got the new release of, like, Heroes of Olympus, because I didn't start reading the books until, like, the end of the Olympian series. So, growing up, I would always get, like, the next book, like, the day it came out, which would be October. This I got a bit later. I don't go out and grab it from the bookstore the day of anymore. I've outgrown that. And this book also takes place, like, the week of Halloween and on Halloween. So, yeah, for nostalgia and vibes, reading this in October would be peak. Not gonna lie, that would be it. But it's still really good. I really like these extra years, extra books that Rick Riordan is doing. I think it's bridging the gap that we had with the Trial of Apollo's book really well. I did not really enjoy the Trials of Apollo books, to be honest. But I think it's really good to, like, see those interviewing years. And also, we get to see Percy as he's, like, finally kind of coming into adulthood and getting ready for that, which is really interesting because for so long he was a kid focused on survival, not really thinking of a future, and now he is thinking of a future and growing up and coming to terms with all that. And it is really interesting and nice to see a character that I grew up with going through all those struggles. Like, it is very much great. I think it's good for younger readers, and again, I think because of those struggles are so relatable, older readers who grew up with the series can still keep reading them and still feel connected to them, because it's like, hey, I went through this exact same thing. I'm now seeing it mirrored in a character that I know and love. So it's really great. So yeah, this book was really fun. I do love that Percy is just, like, the most compassionate of heroes. I swear he is such, like, a compassionate hero, which you don't see a huge amount. There's a lot of people being like, I'm badass, I'm cool, I can do whatever I want because I'm free from, like, constraints of society. And Percy's just like, I care so deeply about anyone and everything I come across. I need to help them all. And it's so nice because, yeah, when they try and kill him, he's like, okay, well, now I can chop off your head without feeling guilty because you're trying to murder me. So, like, self-defense. But the rest of the time, he's such a compassionate hero. So, I mean, it really comes to light in this book how much of one he is, in my opinion. So, really great. Percy Jackson. No notes. Next one. This is The Heart of the World by Amy Kaufman. I am really bad about reading and pronouncing names, especially when they use alternate spellings I'm not familiar with, so I end up just saying them in my head in a funny way. So to me, her name is Amy Kaufman. I could be wrong. So I've been really liking this author a lot. So I read the first book, The Isles of the Gods, a while ago when it came out. Finally got around to reading this book, which was nice. It's a duology. So this book is the end, which I am grateful for. I'm kind of sick and tired of, like, books that were supposed to be singles and then become trilogies and then become 5-book series, and, like, I want to stop reading series. I just want to read a single standalone book, please. We need more of those. We need a lot more of those, I think. Stop making me invest. I know series sell, don't get me wrong. I fully get why they're so, but stop making series, please. More standalones. I'm gonna prop this here. I don't feel like holding it anymore. So this series set in a fantasy world where the gods once walked and then they left, and in this book the gods are back. So now we have gods mucking about with humanity, and while the gods themselves feel more akin to Greek gods in that they feel more like real people rather than like huge beings that shaped the earth or anything like that. Whereas with the Greek gods, they definitely feel more like just people you can know in your life that do shit. So the gods themselves feel more like this, but what's really interesting is the way the author wrote it so that, yeah, the gods themselves don't necessarily have personalities that make them feel like higher beings, but their presence on Earth does, so it affects other people around them, which I think was really interesting. And I think that was a really good way of kind of getting across that these are gods and they do have effects on the world without it being like totally unrelatable and you're having people question why the heck are they listening to these gods. So it was quite good. Basically, what happens in the book is one of the main characters, Leander, is a messenger or who becomes a gateway for his god, and another character who just really wants respect and attention and affection. She becomes the gateway for another god, regrets that, and the two gods are like, we're gonna fight each other because, I don't know, they just fight each other. The one guy is supposed to be a gambling god, so he's just like, well, war is gambling. Let's just roll the dice and see if we can take over this land. And the other god is a warrior god, so she's like, I'm gonna fight you back. I'm gonna fight. And it's like, great, you guys killed the country in the past because of this, and it's for a stupid, petty reason. So that's why I say they feel like Greek gods, because it's like, you have no actual motive for this. You're just doing this because you can. So in this book, it's a lot slower, it's a lot less action-packed than the first book, but that's because it's delving a lot more into sort of the magic and the idea of worship and what it means to believe in gods and things like that. So it's definitely a lot more interesting. So despite the fact it has a slower pace, it was still really good, in part because this is a sequel, so you already know the characters and you're already invested in the characters, so you don't need all this action and high stakes. I mean, there's still high stakes, but you don't need it as much because you already know the characters. So it was overall really fun to read. I enjoyed it. I am glad that all the characters got, their version of a happy ending for the most part. I mean, a couple characters died, so it's probably not that happy for them. But most of the characters that I cared about got their version of a happy ending, so that was really nice. And it was just kind of a good book. It was just overall really fun. Another library book. This one was Red Rising by Pierce Brown. And I know, I'm late to the game. The book came out a while ago, like many years ago. I know. I'm reading it now only for the first time. I still really liked it. Now, my only thing, frankly, to me, this book felt a little bit like a ripoff of The Will of the Many. Now, The Will of the Many came out recently, so obviously The Will of the Many is more a ripoff of Red Rising than anything. But because I read The Will of the Many first, this felt more like a copycat. And I can't even really explain why, because when you break down the story and the plot beats, there isn't a huge amount of similarity other than guy wants to overthrow corrupt government and world. Like that's really the only thing that they have in common. But despite that they feel very similar, they have different authors obviously, but they feel very similar. Now that said, I really did enjoy Red Rising. It was really good. This one at least is more of a, gritty survival story. The main character, gets thrown into basically a death school because, I don't know, books really seem to like doing death schools sometime, and at least this one, it was like justified because they had this whole idea of only the strongest can lead, so only the strongest should be able to survive. So I at least kind of get the thought process, but like also why. Anyway, so the basic premise is that this world has a very strict caste system, so it's impossible to break out of your caste, except for the main character who ends up getting himself altered to become the highest caste from the lowest that he was born into, so he can essentially prove that the caste system is stupid, and also so he can get revenge on the highest caste because they're terrible people. They murder a lot of people in this. Like, there's a lot of murdered people. Seriously, how did the society survive if all their upper brass is literally just murder happy people? Well, you know, whatever. You don't question it when you're reading it. You question it in hindsight, so that's probably a good thing. Now, the only thing I didn't like about this book was that the main character, Darrow, I didn't really feel he had the best motivation. So that's not to say there wasn't a motivation and that he didn't have one. It basically what happened is his wife sacrifices herself, and so he's kind of guilted into having to join a rebellion and become a rebel in order to continue her dream that she had, which is a very common trope, as we all know, and isn't horrible. But prior to that, they very clearly established that Darrow wasn't really much of a rebel. He wasn't really interested in rebelling. He just wanted to make life better for his friends and family, which is a good motivation, don't get me wrong. But I think this was the intention that they were trying to hint at in the book in the beginning, is that Darrow initially wants to change the system from within, whereas his wife and other people want to change the system from without, essentially. And I think that needed to be more obvious. I think we need to have a little bit more in dialogue or an extra scene where it's clear that Darrow wants change. He doesn't want the Reds to be as oppressed as they are, but that he thinks that it needs to be done from within the system, whereas his wife feels it needs to be done more radically. And that's where those two have a conflict, so that when she dies, he's like, dang, clearly I was wrong, and now I'm pissed and I'm gonna do my wife's will. I think that just needed to be a little bit more strongly established, frankly. It wasn't the clearest because he just kind of like got dragged into things, not really wanting to do it until they basically were like, here's all the stuff that's been happening. Are you angry enough now to join us? And he was like, yeah, fine, now I'm angry enough to join you. Because of that, I feel like the beginning could have been a little stronger. Once you get through the beginning though, so good. Really good. Once things get going, this book is amazing. But the beginning is really slow, so I can see that turning people off. And yeah, it just could have been a little stronger there. But other than that, great book. I immediately put a hold on the second book, and I should be getting that soon to read from the library, so I'm looking forward to that. The last book that I read is Ace of Shades by Amanda Foody. And so I picked this book up just from browsing in the bookstore. As I get a lot of books, I just kind of go to a bookstore and browse and grab whatever I think is interesting. You know, no algorithm here. I really wanted to enjoy this book because it sounded interesting. And I'm going to be frank with you. Because of the title, I thought maybe there was a chance we'd have an asexual character. We do not, which is sad, but that was on me for, you know, making up fake promises. That said, if you want to read a book that has casinos and stuff in it that does have asexual characters, please go read Aces Wild, a heist. That's really good. Anyways, this is a completely different book though. So this book didn't blow me away, wasn't that great. It has sequels. I'm not gonna read them, I can tell you that now. Didn't really get super vested in it. So one of the things that bugged me from the beginning, and I just had to let go, was I don't understand how the magic works. So the magic is tied to blood. Cool. Everybody gets 2 magics. And these magics determine their middle name and their last name. Okay, cool. They do not explain how these magics get passed on to children. So I'm going through this book being like, how do children inherit talents? Is it just like there's like 8 possible combinations for every child? Do you only pass down your blood talent, which is the stronger one, and the split talent, that's the weaker one, does not? I have no idea. You know, does the mother's blood talent always become the blood talent? It doesn't in this book. Is the father's blood talent always the one that becomes the blood talent in the child? Like, how does it work? How do you track lineages? I'm not understanding that. How does that work? That was my biggest complaint, because I did not understand how this magic was supposed to be set up to work. It was an interesting idea, was not super well explained. I'm not saying it was poorly thought out because I suspect that the author knows the answers to these questions. She just didn't explain them, which really annoyed me because I was like, what the hell's going on? Especially because inheritance is like a very important part of this book, because the secret behind, and one of the main characters' parents, I mean, you can see what it's going to be coming from a mile away, but like that's a very important plot point. I need to understand how inheritance works if this is such an important plot point. Thank you. Now, the actual story was just okay in my opinion. Basically, the main character, Anne, goes to this world's equivalent of Las Vegas and is looking for her mother, who's her adoptive mother, who's been missing. And she only has one name to go on, so she tracks down the guy who is conveniently a hot gang lord, her age. Yeah, you can see where I'm going with this. These two end up having a very strong attraction. Granted, nothing actually comes of it in this book, but I think that's because the author's trying to tease you into, you know, reading the other books. So basically she gets involved in the city and in the criminal gangs in order to track down her mother, who is dead, as far as we know at the end of this book, like dead. And as a result, the two characters end up entangled in some very deadly powers in the city and very nearly die themselves. Part of it, I think, is like I was hoping it would maybe, you know, stick the landing. And because it's building up this whole series, this whole book, that there's a Phoenix Club, which is basically people who time cannot kill them. You can still murder them by, you know, shooting them in the head, but time itself will not result in them dying, which is cool. And that because of this, they get bored and they have what's called the Shadow Game, which is essentially a game they force people to play that always results in the invited guests dying. Cool, murder game, cool with this. The murder game's a card game, which I get it. Cards, gambling, all that stuff. Here's the thing though. It's really hard to explain rules to a game you made up in a book. It's really hard to make that understandable. So I was like, I don't understand what these rules are, frankly, for this game, even though you've like said them. I'm not following it. Okay, and it's a gambling game. Cool, the stakes are, you know, life force. This is still boring because they're just sitting there playing a card game. It's boring. Now, I don't mind that there was gambling involved or that there were cards involved. I just think it needed like a little bit more action. What? I don't know, frankly. I'm not giving it that much thought, but I think it needed just a touch more action to be interesting rather than just we're sitting at a card table pretending we don't know each other while one of us bets the other's life. Like, you could have done something more dramatic or interesting. I don't know. Something with movement. Maybe the Shadow Game was in fact like you're on like a chessboard or a like game board and you have to make bets and do gambling things in order to like successfully move X number of spaces forward or something. I think that would have been more interesting because then like maybe, you know, each step has a challenge, and if you complete that challenge then you can get bonus things that give you an edge in the next gambling round. Something. I don't know. I feel that might have been a little bit more exciting and interesting. That's just me. It didn't stick the landing. Didn't really like the characters. They're just kind of meh. Weird thing about the writing. So it's in third person limited, but what it did a number of times was not stick to third person limited. So information that N discovered about herself that she knew she had to keep secret would then be in the next chapter that's supposed to be, you know, third person limited to Levi's point of view. It would mention, but N couldn't tell Levi that. Levi's not supposed to know anything about this. Why are you bringing this up in the prose? This is third person limited. You can allude to he knew she was hiding something, sure. You should not actually be directly mentioning the thing that she is hiding. It did that a few times where it was very clearly like not actually sticking itself to third person limited, which if you want to just write like third person omnipotent, cool, fine, great. don't name your chapter titles after the main characters and then write the majority of the prose if it is limited. It doesn't work. It's confusing. I was like, what is going on here? It just didn't work in my opinion. So it's not a bad book. It's not like a terrible book or anything. I just didn't personally like it. There were too many things where I was like, this isn't interesting. This is weird. I'm not following this. It just didn't do much for me in the end. Okay, so that is it for the books I have read for the past 3 months. And we are now moving into summer, which means more books. I do not have a specific summer reading list or anything like that, in part because I put books on hold at the library and then they just like pop up. And I'm like, oh shoot, I gotta read this book now. And so I do have a physical TBR that's like 8 books tall still. And yet I still went to the physical library the other day and borrowed 2 books. So those are the first I'm gonna read. One is by E.K. Johnston. She's an author I've read a couple other books on. It's a retelling of 1001 Nights. So I, as somebody who really likes retellings of fairy tales and Old Myths and stuff, very excited for that. The other is The Lost Queen by, I think the name is Signe Pike. That's a big book that I have, but it's a historical fantasy, or just maybe historical. I don't know if there's really much fantasy in it. But essentially it's a story about the a medieval queen, who is the sister of the historical figure who most likely inspired the character of Merlin. So this is like a historical King Arthur-esque retelling. I am here for this. I'm excited to read that one, so I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, so that's gonna be it from me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and maybe a comment. I hope you guys enjoyed me chatting about books and hearing my thoughts on them, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye!